Imagine for a second that you want to build this fortress to keep a very specific problem out of your house.
Okay.
You drop the plans, you reinforce the walls. But to make absolutely sure the fortress works, you realize you have to install surveillance cameras in every single private room of your own home.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's intense.
Right. Because you wanted safety, but suddenly the cure requires you to sacrifice all of your privacy. And that tension between locking things down and watching everything is exactly where we are starting today. Welcome to the deep dive. We are looking at this fascinating collision that defines so much of our modern internet, is the crash between digital privacy, state regulation, and online safety.
It is arguably, one of the most defining structural challenges of the digital age. I mean, you really can't alter one of those pillars without the other two just violently shaking.
Exactly. And we have a highly contrasting stack of sources today to help us, navigate this architecture. On one side, we are looking at a video by a creator named Adrian Logan. It's titled, "We Need to Ban Adult Content and Why I Think So."
Got it.
And then on the other side, we have this really comprehensive written critique that just completely dismantles Logan's arguments from a structural and technological perspective.
Right.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack this specific debate. We are going to weigh Logan's demand for a total nationwide infrastructure ban against the alternative proposals from the critique.
So here's our roadmap for today. First, the case for a ban. Second, the privacy paradox. Third, the prohibition effect. Fourth, psychology and human connection. And finally, number 5, the regulatory middle ground.
Starting with part 1, the case for a ban, looking specifically at Adrian Logan's argument.
Digital creator Adrian Logan certainly does not mince words here. He explicitly rejects the idea of using digital ID systems, arguing instead for a total infrastructure-level block. For him, digital verification is essentially a dystopian show-me-your-papers system. He's deeply concerned that these ID frameworks fundamentally destroy our right to privacy and just swing the door wide open for government overreach.
And his argument goes way beyond just the privacy aspect. He's really focused on the societal toll, pointing out that extreme material is actively bleeding over onto mainstream platforms like X and Facebook. He argues it heavily distorts how people perceive real-world relationships, absolutely crushes the confidence of young men by offering a digital easy fix, and at the end of the day commodifies independent creators just for short-term financial gain. So it's a perspective heavily rooted in the moral and social impact of all this digital access.
Which brings us to part 2, the privacy paradox, and the main critique of this prohibition approach. The analysis points out a pretty massive logical contradiction in the total ban argument. Think about it. You really can't hold an anti-regulation stance, fearing government tracking and digital IDs on one hand, while simultaneously demanding a nationwide ban on the other. Why? Well, because enforcing a true infrastructure-level block inherently requires massive, constant state surveillance of data packets just to make sure people are complying. It's a total ideological collision. You're basically trusting the state with absolute censorship power while saying they can't be trusted with a digital ID.
Moving on to part 3, the prohibition effect, markets and migration.
This is the second major critique of the ban approach, and it's rooted in historical reality. When you ban a highly normalized behavior, the demand doesn't just magically poof into thin air. It shifts. Banning mainstream platforms simply pushes vulnerable users directly into the shadows. We're talking unregulated, dark web adjacent spaces and peer-to-peer networks, straight into the waiting arms of cybercriminals and phishing scammers where literally zero safety protocols exist.
And the economic fallout of that shift is huge. On regulated platforms, you have strict banking laws like Know Your Customer, active content moderation, and thousands of creators making safe, autonomous livelihoods. A blanket ban destroys that mainstream compliance literally overnight. The argument here is that an outright ban would instantly demolish the financial independence and labor safety provided by platforms like OnlyFans, leaving creators completely stranded and shoving users right into illegal networks.
Part 4, Psychology and Human Connection. Are we confusing the symptom with the cause?
The analysis makes a fascinating psychological pivot here, suggesting that treating digital content as the root cause of male loneliness is confusing a symptom with the actual disease. The source notes that in our current era, one defined by an epidemic of structural isolation, digital content often just serves as an accessible outlet. Stripping away those digital outlets without actually addressing the crushing costs of urbanization, intense social anxiety, and widespread isolation doesn't magically fix society. It just leaves already isolated people completely disconnected with absolutely no outlet at all.
So rather than using a blunt policy hammer, the proposed alternative frames this as a public health issue that requires educational solutions. We're talking about bringing in medical professionals, like endocrinologists, to explain biological changes. It means radically improving media literacy, removing the societal taboo that actually gives forbidden content its psychological thrill in the first place, and actively fostering real, peer-to-peer communication to shatter those algorithmic echo chambers. The ultimate goal? Building genuine psychological resilience.
I absolutely love this Hollywood analogy from the analysis. Media literacy should teach young people to view adult content exactly the same way they view a big-budget Marvel superhero movie. It is pure, highly produced, exaggerated fiction. There are scripts, makeup artists, and professional lighting crews involved. Once someone realizes it's just a constructed simulation and not reality, the risk of it warping their real-world expectations for intimacy just plummets.
Which brings us to a massive narrative hinge in this explainer. We've seen the push for a ban, and we've heard the critique that bans just create surveillance states and black markets. So is there actually a middle ground here? What's happening in the real world to solve this?
That leads us to Part 5, the regulatory middle ground, specifically focusing on the EU and Ireland.
Regulators in Europe are actively ignoring the false choice between a total ban and total dystopia. Through the Digital Services Act, or the DSA, and the Irish Online Safety Code, they are totally rewriting the rulebook. Watchdogs, like Ireland's Colmishún na Man, are legally forcing tech giants to ditch those completely useless "Yes, I am 18" buttons. Self-declaration is officially out. Audited, objective age assurance is now the law.
And they are not messing around with enforcement. The stakes are wildly high. Platforms that drag their feet or fail to implement these objective checks aren't just getting a slap on the wrist. They're facing fines up to 20 million euros, or up to 10% of their global turnover. So yeah, this framework has some serious financial teeth. But wait, what about Logan's very real concern about losing our privacy? Well, to solve the privacy paradox, the EU relies on decentralized cryptography, specifically something called a zero-knowledge mini-wallet. It's an elegant three-step process. First, the app communicates securely on your local device. Second, the math verifies literally one single data point. Is this user over 18? Yes or no? And third, the website lets you in, but it never actually learns who you are. It builds an absolute privacy wall, proving your age without ever exposing your identity.
Plus, the DSA doesn't just stop at age checks. It uses safety by design principles to completely shift the burden away from the user and directly onto the platform's algorithm. It makes deceptive user interfaces, those sneaky dark patterns, illegal. It heavily penalizes algorithms that push extreme content, and it enforces an absolute strict ban on targeting ads or profiling minors based on their sensitive data.
So what is our ultimate takeaway from all of this? When it comes to navigating the modern internet, the most effective reality doesn't seem to be giving in to alarmism or blind censorship. Empowering people through media literacy, combined with smart, privacy-preserving tech, represents a highly sustainable, legal middle ground. It holds the big tech monopolies accountable, and it protects youth, all without destroying independent livelihoods or sacrificing adult privacy to an authoritarian ban.
Which leaves us with one incredibly fascinating question to ponder. As this zero-knowledge cryptography gets better and better, will other nations look at this and adopt a privacy-preserving middle ground? Or will the highly emotional, visceral push for absolute prohibition ultimately define the future architecture of our internet? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. It is absolutely something to think about the next time you log on.